Good morning, Thursday. Let's jump into it, shall we? Quarter number 2, day number 3, day 47 overall. Thursday, October 29th, 2020, my homeroom. You have music today. Oh, and by the way, if you were here at school, you would be having your specials together. So I'm going to allow you to stay in your small teams meeting and do your specials together if you want to, since you'd be doing them together here. We're going to really dig deeply and dive deeply into the electoral process today and the campaign for the presidency. As you see, we have an electoral college map here, which we will fully explain with a great little video. And we have a list of the states from top to bottom, from the largest number of electors to the smallest. Let's zip down there and take a look at it. So you've got California with the most population, so they have the most electors. We're number 3, tied with New York because of our population. And we have more electoral, we have more bang for the buck. If they win California, you get a whole slate of electoral votes, and you see all the way down to the real lightly populated states get only 3. That's Alaska, Delaware, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, and Wyoming. So presidential campaigns normally don't even visit those states because there's so few electoral votes that would be going to them. And that matches up very closely to the number of representatives for each state. You'll see California has 53 people in the House of Representatives, and they get 55 electoral votes. You have Hawaii, which has 4 electoral votes, and they have 2 representatives. So it's basically the number of representatives plus the 2 senators, and that's the number of your electoral votes. Let's check that out. Let's check out Florida, 29, and see 27 right there. So you add 2 senators, and it's 29 electoral votes. So it all makes sense. You just have to think about it, and please ask questions. We'll have more scary stories today, more chances to recite the preamble. Please be reading every day. It's very important that you read your books every day that you get online or from the library or your own personal collection. Your narrative assignment for the scary story is tomorrow. I would like you to be ready to read it if you want to during tomorrow morning's meeting. We have our 10 words, and I hope you are looking these up on the definitions, dictionary.com, and the spelling training. We've been doing both of these here at school with the 7 people face-to-face. We've got punctuation review video, punctuation Jeopardy, and another punctuation Jeopardy that you guys can play during your small groups meeting. And I decided to give you access to the game that was so popular in the late 80s and the early 90s called the Oregon Trail. And I would bet you a lot of your parents or uncles or aunts played the Oregon Trail when they were in elementary school. Today, the Gifted Block Puzzles is actually a YouTube video today, and see how many you get correct. The answers for Wednesday, the correct answer to that one is D. There are 17 squares total in there. And this gives you the order in which you would have to do the transfer of those creatures and the cabbage from one shore to the other. And this is a crazy fun fact. Jefferson and John Adams paid a visit to William Shakespeare's home in Stratford-upon-Avon in 1786. There they chipped off a piece from Shakespeare's chair as a souvenir. Naughty. Goodness gracious. I don't recommend that if you go to museums or visit historical places to chip off pieces. But they did, according to their own reports. They were proud of it. And again, here's your electoral votes and the number of representatives. Let's jump into that campaign. Stop this share, go to another one. There we go. The campaign, that's what we're in the middle of. The last, let's see, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, last 5 days of this campaign for presidency that has been going on now seemingly forever. Yeah. If you look in Webster's Student Dictionary, the word campaign is defined as a series of battles or other military actions having a special goal. It could certainly be said that the campaign for president is sometimes like a war. The campaign is everything that leads up to the election. That would include all the advertisements you see on TV, radio, billboards, and in the newspaper, and of course online. It also includes the bumper stickers, buttons, and signs you see in people's lawns. It means rallies, fundraisers. In fact, Joe Biden and Donald Trump are going to be here in town today in the Tampa Bay area. Debates, town meetings, press conferences, photo opportunities, and speeches. When you see candidates marching in parades, shaking hands, kissing babies, they are campaigning. They're trying to sell themselves to let you know that they would be the best president ever. In the weeks and months leading up to the election, the candidates will travel around the country, meet as many voters as possible, explain their positions on all kinds of issues, and try to show voters that they would make a better president than their opponent. The candidates will work very hard to convince voters to support them. Working with a campaign manager, they will plan the strategy of the campaign very carefully. The strategy they use may be the difference between winning and losing the election. Some people run really brilliant campaigns, others don't. And usually the one that runs the best campaign wins. An election campaign, like a battlefield campaign, is usually planned to the smallest detail. Everything the candidate does is aimed at attracting voters. Careful attention is paid to what the candidates say, what they do, what they wear, how they present themselves, where they go, who they are seen shaking hands with, what books they read, and even how much money they spend on a haircut. It's true. Every day, the candidates try to make headlines or get on the evening news. If the candidate was a war hero, like Dwight Eisenhower, movie star Ronald Reagan, or athlete Bill Bradley, they will do everything they can to take advantage of their popularity. If they have a weakness, and everybody does, they will try to hide it. And if their opponent has a weakness, they will attack it. It doesn't sound very nice. Politics can get ugly at times. We are all bombarded with images of the candidates in an election year. Sometimes we see them saying positive things about what they plan to do for the country. Other times we see them or people speaking on behalf of them saying negative things about their opponent. Candidates routinely are accused of scandalous behavior, having no experience, being dumb, favoring the rich, dodging the draft, being a warmonger, or not having the courage to fight. And you know how long this goes back? To the very beginning of our country, except for George Washington, who was elected twice unanimously. After that, it started getting ugly. In fact, the very earliest campaigns, I would say things like, if he's elected, the streets will run with blood. There will be mayhem and craziness everywhere. I promise you, it's in history. When a candidate has a rally or speech, his staff may print up signs and give them out to people so the crowd will look enthusiastic on TV. They will plant questions that will give the candidate the chance to give an answer that makes them look good. They may even plant people at an opponent's rally to ask embarrassing questions. There have been cases of TV lines being cut and other dirty tricks being pulled to win an election. In chapter 1, you read about the Watergate burglars breaking into an office to get information that would help the president get elected. Things like that do happen. And Nixon did this in 1972. And then this scheme was uncovered, and it led to Nixon almost being impeached, but he resigned before that happened because he got caught doing rather bad things and then lying about it and covering it up. How do citizens know what to believe? That's a good question. Voters have to pay attention and stay informed. They should read newspapers and news magazines. They should find out how the candidates stand on each issue. They should be looking at what each candidate has done in other elective offices they've held. These days, a lot of the presidential campaign is conducted through television. Question everything you see in a candidate's TV commercials. Always remember that the candidate is trying to show himself off in the best possible way. You cannot make a fair evaluation just by watching TV commercials. It's kind of like trying to evaluate a product just by watching their commercials. Of course they'll look great because they want you to buy the product. It may sound hard to believe, but in America's early days, it was considered undignified for a candidate to go out and solicit votes or to ask for votes. You didn't see George Washington kissing babies and stopping into neighborhoods to sample free food or ethnic foods from different cultures. Things might have been different if there had been TV or even still photography back then. In 1828, Andrew Jackson changed all that. He changed everything in terms of campaigning. He went out and gave speeches to small groups of people asking for their support. These came to be called stump speeches because the candidate would use a tree stump as a makeshift stage. In other words, he'd find a tree stump from a tree that was cut down, stand on top of it to be a foot or two higher than everybody else, and start talking loudly about how great he is and how terrible the opponent is. Jackson defeated President John Quincy Adams, and candidates have been campaigning for votes ever since. The supporters of William Henry Harrison used brass bands, bonfires, and torchlight parades to get people excited about their candidate. It worked. Harrison beat President Martin Van Buren in 1840. By 1869, railroads had stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific. For the first time, candidates could travel far and wide looking for votes. The whistle stop tour began. At each stop, the candidate would go to the back of the train and make a short speech to the people who gathered there. When the train whistle blew, the speech was over, and it was off to the next town. William Jennings Bryan logged 18,000 miles and countless speeches in his 1896 campaign. He didn't win, by the way. The whistle stop tour pretty much was over by 1952, when both candidates used airplanes to fly around the country, and of course, cars were everywhere. By 1924, radio became an important campaign tool. Candidates would still travel, but for the first time, they could send their words all over the country without having to go all over the country. Starting in the 1950s, TV became the most important campaigning tool. Candidates suddenly had to pay close attention to the way they dressed and the way they looked on camera. Candidates have always used the technology of their time to campaign for president. Nowadays, all the candidates and political parties have a website. With the internet, the candidate doesn't have to go to the voter can go to the candidate. Even in the information age, candidates still want to travel around the nation and meet face-to-face with voters. These days, many candidates tour the country by bus. Candidates' campaign strategy will change week to week, sometimes day to day. Candidates watch polls very carefully to see if their strategies are working. Watching a poll, what does that mean? Not P-O-L-E, a poll. A poll is sort of a fake election. During the election campaign, surveys are constantly being taken to see how voters feel about the candidates. Long before election day, you will hear that candidate X is ahead in the polls or candidate Y is catching up in the polls. These polls are usually taken by calling hundreds of voters on the phone and asking them a series of questions. Polls are conducted very carefully and very scientifically, and more often than not, they're amazingly accurate. Candidates often plan their strategy according to the polls. If the polls say a candidate is weak in a state, he may devote more time campaigning there. If the polls say he's so far behind that he can't win in that state, he may decide it would be smarter to spend his time and money elsewhere. And if the polls say he's certain to win that state, he will probably decide not to spend his time and money campaigning there either. Some candidates will drop out of the race entirely if the poll suggests it's a hopeless cause. The polls are watched carefully to see how voters are responding to a candidate's views. If the polls show that the candidate's position on a certain issue is unpopular, he may change his position. Politicians are often accused of following the polls rather than expressing their true beliefs. Always trying to get more votes. Voters also pay attention to the polls. If the polls say a candidate is way behind, people may feel that don't waste your vote on that losing cause, even if they agree with that candidate's views. They might decide to cast their vote for somebody who has a better chance of winning. And if the polls are predicting that one candidate has an overwhelming lead just before election day, a lot of people won't even bother voting. They figure their vote isn't even needed. All right, we will stop there. And when we get together in our meeting, we'll also have some scary story. Although sometimes following the election campaign can be pretty scary, the way they talk about each other. See you soon.